studying history, archaeology and folk beliefs since his teens. His undergraduate dissertation focused on folk beliefs and witchcraft, and having previously read Ralph Merrifield's Archaeology of Ritual and Magic, he noticed there was a huge amount of work which could be done to further explore the archaeology of witchcraft. At that point, his research really escalated into a major project which has culminated in the publication of Magical House Protection, the Archaeology of Counter-Witchcraft, which you can get up the stairs. And also have a chat with him. So yeah, I'd like to welcome to the stage Herbert.
There we go. So, I've all recovered emotionally from that now. I'm still recovering. That was excellent, by the way. Thank you very much for that. That was brilliant. So, I'm going to be talking to you about the archaeology of magical house protection. As you just heard, I studied, well, you didn't hear this bit, but I did, during my undergraduate degree, I studied the history of witchcraft. I'd already been an amateur archaeologist for something like 15 years before that, and so I'd already come across the work of Ralph Merrifield, which you can see there. And this book covers a period of about 4,000 years of UK history and archaeology, looking at basically magical and ritual things, or things that other archaeologists weren't sure what to do with usually. But there are two chapters in this book that cover the period that I was most interested in, which was the 17th century and slightly onwards. And I realised that there was this huge kind of gulf in scholarship. At the time, well, for a long time, I was doing book reviews for various magazines, looking at the history of witchcraft. And it really struck me that most of these books on the history of witchcraft didn't include anything about archaeology at all. And there is a huge amount of archaeology relating to witchcraft, and it's just not covered in the history of witchcraft generally ever. Okay, there are one or two tiny exceptions, but they're very rare. Of course, my book is really, really, really useful for this kind of thing. So do feel free to go and have a look at it. It's unfortunately a very expensive library edition academic hardback at the moment, but it's well worth it. It's well worth it, and it will come out in a cheaper edition in due course. So to begin with, what I'd like you to do is imagine being in, I know it's hard to do, but imagine a little 17th century cottage. Imagine you're in the 17th century, living in this little 17th century cottage. You don't have distractions of electricity or noise from motors or anything like that. You're living in a rural environment. You're much closer to nature than we are today, unless, like many of you, you consciously think about doing that. And magic is kind of a visceral presence in the world at that time. People, they didn't believe in magic, it just was a fact. Magic was part of life, as many of you maybe still think too. And indeed I do. But essentially, magic was regarded as real, and for that reason people were aware that there were people who were good at using it, and there were people who could use it for ill as well. Then we had cunning folk, or wise men, wise women, who you would turn to in times of need. And there were also the opposite. You knew that if people could do good things with it, there would be experts who could do bad things with it, which might be your sort of dark witches, as it were. Now, the cunning folk were incredibly important at this time. So much so that in the 17th century there was a chap called George Gifford who complained, he was a priest, and he complained that his parishioners went to the local cunning person as if they were his god. Okay, that's how upset George Gifford was, that his parishioners just didn't respect him at all, and when they needed help, they went to the local cunning person because they had actual resources they could deploy to help make your life better. Now, the black witchcraft side of things, if you were to just read the history of witchcraft, what you'd be reading usually is accusations of black witchcraft that are often nothing to do with actual witchcraft. They're usually to do with sort of petty-mindedness, jealousy, squabbles, envy, things like that. But black witchcraft did happen. Okay, we find archaeology of black witchcraft. So this is an example from near Manchester, it's Prestwich. There's a beautiful, what used to be a village church there, and there's a pub next to it, right next door to it. The pub borders on the graveyard, and people were doing some exploration or renovation down in the cellar, and they discovered that there was a false wall. There was a void, and they thought, "Oh, let's see what's behind this." So they took the wall down, and they discovered a little pouch that had these figures inside it. These figures have been stylistically dated to the 17th century. Next to these figures was also a dead cat, which had dried out, and also a pile of what was described as vegetable matter, which was actually roots and things. So someone had been gathering together herbs and roots. They'd done some kind of ritual that involved the sacrifice of a cat. They're aiming it at these figures, and rather than clearing it away afterwards, they thought it was so important they had to build a wall to seal it away. So here, I'd say we've clearly got an example of black witchcraft. Okay? And of course, this cellar borders onto a graveyard as well, so it could even be, could even have a sort of necromancy element to it as well. So people feared dark witchcraft. We know that they did dark witchcraft. You'll see some other examples in a minute as well. And so they had to devise ways of dealing with that and how to either repel it or fix it. So, we'll talk about witch bottles first of all. These are really quite common in England. The particular sort you can see there is what we call it's nicknamed a Bellarmine bottle. They were nicknamed Bellarmines because they were thought to be ugly, and this was meant to be a mocking of Cardinal Bellarmine, who was a much hated Catholic cardinal at the time. Actually, they're called Bartman stoneware, nothing to do with The Simpsons. The Rhineland of Germany, they were imported in hundreds of thousands into the UK, filled with wine or beer. But the Germans were really, really excellent at making stoneware, and we were rubbish at it at that time. Okay, so we needed these vessels because they were incredibly useful. And so they're non-porous. They've got this incredible salt glaze. Is there a pointer on this? There is. So you can see we've got this kind of skin-like salt glaze, which is actually a very toxic process. We've got a big round belly. There's a evil-looking visage, and then we've got a nice sort of medallion on the belly there, which often in the finest German examples is a coat of arms. But they tended to send us all the sort of more degraded, slightly worse examples over here. But you can see essentially this is an anthropomorphic bottle. It looks a bit like a human, and so if you're going to do some kind of magic and you want a vessel to do it in, you're going to choose a Bellarmine. Okay. Now, when we find these bottles, they are normally buried. Well, about half of them are buried in front of the hearth, often about this far down. Okay, so someone has taken up their flagstones, they've dug a big hole, and they've put this bottle in the ground, upside down usually, and buried it all back in again. Now, what you find inside these bottles is normally liquid and an aggregation of pins or nails, which have all been deliberately bent. And there's often a lock of hair, sometimes nail. When we forensically analyse the contents, we find nail parings and other types of body hair. Sometimes we think body hair, not head hair, and there are insects sometimes as well, insect legs. This is a typical range of contents. This is from Ralph Merrifield's book I showed you earlier on. So this one's from Ipswich. You can see we've got some bent nails. Up here we've got a fork that has one of its tines broken off. There's a big clot of hair, and there's some fabric that is cut into the shape possibly of a heart. And the other thing is that the liquid inside these bottles is urine. Okay? And there are some 17th century documents, there's quite a few actually, late 17th century documents that describe the boiling of a witch bottle. Right? Now, the boiling is different to the burying. We find the buried ones, okay, and there are quite a number of differences. We think that the boiling is a completely separate practice, but related. And the idea with the boiling was that people thought that if you were bewitched, there was something of the witch inside you. And so if you could then urinate, you've got this substance that has some of the witch inside it, you can then torture it by boiling it. Okay, you can put some pins in a bottle to agitate it even more. And the idea is that as you're boiling it, the witch will be feeling excruciating pain and will come to your house and beg you to please stop boiling the bottle, and in return you can barter for the bewitchment to be lifted. Okay? Some of these pamphlets from the 17th century talk about witches dying because of this process before it could be fixed. And they are convinced in these pamphlets that this process worked. Some of these attempts to boil the witch bottle resulted in the cork blowing out and showering wee and pins. In fact, there's a 19th century example of a cunning person who recommended the use of a metal witch bottle, which exploded, and the victim was killed by shrapnel. Not just any shrapnel, but urine-soaked shrapnel. So the boiling is a separate process, okay? And the reason we know it's separate is because the pamphlets and texts don't talk about bending pins, they don't talk about hair, they don't talk about it being by the hearth, they don't talk about it being upside down, all that kind of stuff. So half of all the bottles found so far are found by the hearth. Now that's really important because we're talking about an early house. The hearth is the only bit of your house that you can't close. Okay, your doors and windows you can shut. The hearth is always open to the sky. If there's any menace trying to get into a house, that's the best way in. And so most of the efforts we find about magic house protection are focused on the hearth, in particular the witch bottles. But we do find them at thresholds as well, and sometimes under floors. This is the contents of another bottle from Greenwich. This one's got, we measured the radius of these bends, and although they all look a bit different, it seems that they're all bent around the same metal bar. My friend Dr. Alan Massey, who's a retired research fellow from Loughborough University, he does all this forensic analysis. You can see again, we've got the, you can see we've got the big clot of hair there as well. This is an X-ray of the same bottle. You can see that all the pins and nails have concreted together in the neck while it's been lying under the ground upside down for so long. This is another example. I'm going to do a quick, sort of speed up a little bit through some of these. This one was found, this one's really popular on Facebook and Twitter at the moment because the niece of the man who found it just recently did a big post and it's gone kind of viral. But this one was found underneath a parish boundary wall in Dorset between Langton Travers and Wortham Travers. It's really weird, it's quite small, it's about this high. I've held it, I looked after it for a while, it fits in the palm of your hand. It feels solid, and after a moment or so it turns to liquid. It's really peculiar. And chemical analysis shows that it's a mixture of beef tallow and spring water. And it seems to have been like a witch bottle to protect cattle. And here we've got a late 18th century version. These two have been implanted in the side of the hearth itself rather than in the ground. And the builders destroyed the end of them, unfortunately, and then the contents fell out. And we found out that at that house, at that time, there was a lady of the house suffering a long lingering illness. People thought she'd been bewitched. These were efforts to unbewitch her. After they'd found these ones, a couple of weeks later, we found one on the other side as well. So there was multiple attempts. The widower actually sealed the house shut after this, and it remained shut until a top financier now owns it, and it was resurrected, and it became this kind of incredible thing because it had so many 18th century artifacts that were untouched inside it. It actually featured on a really excellent documentary I was part of with Channel 4 called Real Wizards: The Search for Harry's Ancestors. Incredibly tedious andram in between little nuggets of facts. There were other respectable people on there. Professor Hutton and other people were on there. We all got very embarrassed by how it turned out. Okay, concealed shoes. How many people have heard of them? Oh, before doing that, I was just going to say, within Scotland, we don't actually have a huge amount of examples of witch bottles as at present. Now, I'm hoping that as a result of what I'm talking to you about today, you can keep your eyes and ears to the ground and let me know if you find any. Now, we do have the best example so far. There's beneath the church in Crail, a small jug was found that was buried deliberately underneath the church. And also in Abbotsford, there's a thing that looks like it might have been something like a witch bottle, which was a pot that had sort of clay inside it, but also lots of hair, and what was described as other gubbins to do with witchcraft. And that one could also be a witch bottle, but that one was interpreted by the people that found it at the time as being a curse. But actually it sounds to me more like it was a witch bottle. It's just, now the idea with these witch bottles, sorry, I went a peek too soon there. The idea with witch bottles, I think, is that you've got this anthropomorphic device, okay? Okay, let's roll back a little bit. Imagine there's a witch somewhere who hates you. They're doing some kind of ritual. They're raising some energy and they're releasing this spell that's going to be sent off to go and harm you. And I want you to think about this with all of the things we're going to talk about today. So imagine there's this energy trundling through the landscape. It's fairly unintelligent. It's been sent with this mission to harm you, okay? It gets to your house, it's trying to get in, it can't, because your shutters are shut, your door's shut, you've got various forms of protection all around. And then it eventually thinks, I'll come down the chimney. So it comes down the chimney, it sort of smells you. There's this anthropomorphic device filled with your urine and hair right at the heart, so it plunges down to attack it instead. And these pins and nails that you've ritually killed, which are now in ghost form inside the bottle, plunges down and gets impaled on them inside and trapped within. Okay, so we've got this kind of spell trap or energy trap, okay, that's going on here, using your own body fluids and hair. Okay, and obviously within the hearth you often will have things like a cast iron fire back, and iron is one of those metals that witches is reputed to not be able to touch as well. So that's that going on. And obviously the nails and pins are also made of iron. Right, now who has heard of concealed shoes before? Okay, that's quite a few of you. Okay, so concealed shoes, this is the most common kind of thing that we find concealed in houses. Believe it or not, in Northampton Central Museum there is a concealed shoes index set up by my friend June Swan. Okay? And basically she is the world's leading historic footwear expert. The Northampton Central Museum is all about historic footwear, and she realised that people were coming to her saying, "Well, I found this shoe in my wall, what do I do with it?" And she started just recording it because she thought it was really interesting. And there's now over 2,000 examples of finds of concealed shoes within the UK in her files. They can be found anywhere in a house, in a roof, inside a wall. Sometimes if you stand up inside an early modern chimney, you can run your fingers around the ledges inside and you can literally just find one. Okay, it's quite amazing how common they are. And occasionally you find over 100 in a building at the same time. So in the Plough in Sittingbourne in Kent, over 100 were found, spanning a period of over 250 years, showing a continuous tradition of people depositing shoes in those buildings. There are certain reasons why certain buildings have more of them than others, to do with how medieval buildings are converted to early modern buildings with chimney stacks, and there's all these voids inside the building that are accessible, and you can drop things into them. But the other thing that's really interesting about them is they're normally found singly, and they're almost always very, very well worn. Okay? Less than 10% of pairs. They're always very, very well worn. So, think about shoes in the past, they were very expensive, they'd be tailor-made for you, and they were expensive to repair. So people would repair and repair and repair them over and over again, rather than buying new ones. And so, by the end of its life, it would be unique to the wearer's foot. Think of the Cinderella story, that's kind of got echoes of that idea inside it. So the single shoe shows a clear element of decision making. It's not just a pair of shoes being thrown away. Someone's taken one shoe and they've hidden it inside a house. Now we've got an element of the same thing as witch bottles here, in that it's unique to your foot, so it embodies you in some way. So any evil coming into the house trying to attack you might be distracted and attack it instead because it thinks it's found you. Okay? So we've got this element of decoy. Okay, so it's a decoy, it's diverting energy away from you, away from your family, into the walls, so hopefully it won't get into the house and attack people within it. But also we have this thing to do with an unofficial English saint called John Shaw. Okay, John Shaw was never officially canonised, but he was kind of like a folk saint. He was a real person. He was a rector in North Marston in Buckinghamshire, thought to have died, I think it's around 1309. And the interesting thing about him is that the pilgrimage to his shrine was the second most popular in the whole of the UK for a period of about 250 years. So second only to Thomas a Becket in Canterbury. So popular and so much money was being made at this pilgrimage shrine that the royal family actually moved it to Windsor so that they could benefit from the revenue. Sounds brilliant, isn't it? That kind of behaviour. Okay, but yeah, so the thing about it is that images of John Shaw, you can see that he's got the devil trapped in a boot there. Images of John Shaw doing this were one of the most popular images in the UK at the time. And in fact, the paintings of him just like this were found on rood screens in many churches that are now gone since post-Reformation. But essentially, we've got this really popular image connecting the idea that you can trap evil in a boot. And then also this idea that we've got this sympathetic link between this foot, a bit of footwear that's unique to your foot, that can help trap or divert spirits away from harming you and your family. We also find shoe outlines as graffiti on buildings. We find them on lead roofs, and we also find them sometimes on stone benches. This is from Canterbury Cathedral. Loads of these are found there, and it seems that when people did a pilgrimage to the church, they would draw an outline around their foot, hoping that some of the holiness of the church would come back to them through the outline, unique outline of their foot. Now, we've had examples in Scotland, Lochcoil Head, Argyll and Bute shoes found there. There's about, they estimated 12 pairs worth, but they probably weren't pairs, from the 19th century found there. It's very popular in Scotland as well. What's that? Yeah, concealed shoes also found in an outhouse as well. I think that's in Orkney, with a lot of bottles as well. So it's something that does happen in Scotland. a lot, just as much as in England. Who likes cats? Okay, I love cats. This is a dry cat from Eckington in Worcestershire. I used to live in Eckington, in Worcestershire, and this was a neighbour basically. They lived in a beautiful old medieval cottage, very thick thatch on it. This cat was found about halfway down the thatch, we think, in a layer that roughly approximates to the 17th century. There's absolutely no way the cat could have got there by itself. You can see it's been squished kind of flat by the thatch as well. Examples of cats. I mean, this is really common. I've got anecdotal examples of well over 200 of these. In fact, it's probably approaching 3. And we find lots of examples where they've been clearly deliberately put there. So in the church in Penrith, a cat was found literally plastered in with the laths. Okay, and this is in a church which is supposed to be protected by God and Jesus and people like that. And we also find in North Yorkshire, in a place called Darlton, a cat wired to the floor joists. And there are lots of anecdotal examples of cats that go missing during building. Okay, and then they're discovered just before the cat dies. You know? And the builders are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, the cat must have got in there by itself." But it's a fairly recent tradition. We've got examples from the turn of the 20th century for sure of this happening. They dry out very slowly. You can see they become what they call desiccated. Their hair falls out, and then they become very brittle. This cat has now been returned to its thatch, which is very nice to know, isn't it? I always like to do that. And minus a few flakes, which we couldn't find afterwards. Okay. They're very brittle. It's really horrible the way they disintegrate a bit when they're found. One thing I should also point out is when people find things like this in their houses, they become incredibly superstitious and jittery. And of course, normally we're talking about country houses where to afford them now you need to be quite well off, or from certainly professional standing. So we're talking about very serious people who aren't normally superstitious will become gibbering wrecks when they find these things in their houses, and they phone me, "What should I do, Brian? What should I do?" And then I get to go there and help them out. And usually I say, put it back, or if possible, put a bit of glass in front of it or something, make it a feature. For example, Red Hotel in Norfolk is now on display. People who go there, they can see it. People wondered, is it real? So they had it x-rayed, and it is real. You can see its last meal. So there are quite a number of pubs and hotels in England particularly that have their cats on display. Now, people have speculated about foundation sacrifice, but normally foundation sacrifices are in the foundations. So these cats are found in all parts of buildings. And what I think is going on, having looked at so many of these, is that cats being semi-nocturnal, the idea is that and cats also at this time, I remember when we were talking about the 17th century in particular, people weren't spaying or neutering cats, so you would often have too many cats. They would kill a cat and hope that its spirit would basically live on in the house as kind of like a spirit guardian and be active, protecting your house while you sleep, because it's nocturnal, semi-nocturnal. Perhaps protecting you from the witch's familiar, perhaps protecting you from spells. Right, written charms. Okay, this particular example is Scottish examples. I did write them down. So Comlongan Castle. Has anyone been there? Apparently there are dried cats at Comlongan Castle in Scotland. The furthest away dried cat I've got so far in my records is from Chile. Okay, and it happens all throughout Europe. Everything we've talked about, except for witch bottles, okay, which seem to be uniquely English, or certainly Britain. Okay, is you can find throughout most of Europe. So, and that's all in my book, of course, which is upstairs. Written charms. This one is brilliant. This one reads, and I'll read you the text. It's from the mid-19th century. We actually have in the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth about 15 examples by the same cunning man. Because what would happen is that you would pay a cunning person to write one of these for you. Okay? This particular one says, Lord Jesus Christ, be the preserver of William Pentrinant, his cows, calves, milk, butter, cattle of all ages, mares, suckers, horses of all ages, ewes, lambs, you get the picture, right? And then it says, prosper him on this farm to live luckily, safe from all witchcraft and evil men or women spirits or wizards or hardness of heart. Amen. Now this is mid-19th century. This isn't a period that historians generally talk about witchcraft in, okay? But this is normal belief at that time. Absolutely normal for people to still believe in witchcraft. My friend Jason Simmons did a really good book reviving the work of William Painter in Cornwall. He was looking at folklore and witch belief in Cornwall at the turn of the 20th century. And beliefs were just as strong in that era, as they, in my opinion, as they were in the 17th century. And that's sort of early 20th century Cornwall. Anyway, apart from the incredible sort of biblical tone of this and the invocations to Jesus and God, we have an abracadabra word triangle down here, which is obviously Arabic magic. Okay? We also have loads of astrological symbols here. We've got the moon, we've got Mercury, we've got Venus, we've got various others, and little six-pointed stars as well. And we've got also the seal from the Key of Solomon, which was very popularly known at the time. It had been republished many times in pamphlet form. And lots of cunning folk, self-styled cunning folk in the 19th century would make sure they had a copy of that on their shelf when you went to see them, in addition perhaps to a stuffed crocodile or something like that, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Now the thing about these charms is that this is the culmination of a period of maybe 3 weeks worth of ritual that would take place at the property. The cunning person would visit over and over again, going to all the corners and boundaries of the property, doing various rituals, maybe burying eggs, maybe splashing holy water even. And it would all culminate in a final ritual where the charm would be deposited somewhere secretly in the house, sometimes folded into a sheet of lead, tucked in between timbers or stone, sometimes rolled up into a little vial and buried. We're very lucky to have so many from Wales in particular. They're undiscovered. This is another example. This one was designed to be portable from Sheffield. This one was designed to be maybe sewn into your garment so you carry it around with you. There were lots of other ways people would protect themselves. I like to deal with the hidden ones, the ones that you can't normally see. So people would often use religious iconography, obviously. They could sometimes drink potions. They could wear other symbols. There were things that they would do that everybody knew to do. But these are the things that we were buried or hidden. Similar to a charm, but the opposite. Here we have a curse from Dymock. This is from the 17th century, but in the style of Roman, as in it's a lead tablet, okay, and it's written backwards, okay, so it's backwards writing. It's a curse on a poor young lady called Sarah Ellis. I was lucky enough to look after this charm for about 2 weeks. It's an incredible thing, it's about that large. And there is some folklore in the Forest of Dean about a crossroads where Sarah Ellis is meant to have been buried after she died in tragic circumstances. So, and then another example of another curse. This one is from, sorry to jump around a bit, I should have said this earlier, but yeah, this one's from Hereford. This is from the 19th century. It's found behind some oak panelling. Someone's taken a stick, they put a little rag around the top to make the head. They made a very crude dress out of another bit of fabric. But if you follow this line here, you can see there's a bit of an edge. And that's because inside the skirt there's a big piece of parchment on which is written a hideous curse on another young woman in Hereford. Horse skulls. Do we have any fans of horses? Yeah, horses are lovely, lovely, lovely animals, aren't they? Basically, horse skulls, talking about your ritual dance earlier, obviously, horse skulls crop up a lot in ritual dance in England in particular, and in Wales, the Mally Floyd and the Obios down in Padstow. There are lots of examples of horse skulls being used in ritual dance from all around Europe and even into Asia. But yeah, I think that when you look at them like this, you can see how large they are and also how formidable looking they are. I think there's an element of like a kind of gargoyle function, I think, with horse skulls when they're used in ritual dance, where they're kind of scaring away other spirits, if you like. You know, you're kind of charging through with them. And it's like, here's this incredibly formidable thing that everything else is scared of and they all disappear from it. I think there's that as well. But in terms of concealment, possibly the best example, which Ralph Merrifield talks in his book, is that in a pub called the Portway in Staunton on Wye in Herefordshire, they found 24 screwed to the underside of the pub, okay, in the floorboards. And then in a nearby village called Peterchurch, there's a private hall, which wasn't even a pub. They found a similar number screwed to the underside of the floor there. And when asked when they asked locals why did that happen, they said it was to make the fiddle go better, to make the acoustics better. Yeah. And that's interesting. I don't believe it, but it's interesting. And then in 1954, the Royal Society of Antiquaries of Ireland did a similar study looking at are there any horse skulls under Irish cottages, and in all areas of Ireland they were finding horse skulls underneath the main flagstone in front of the hearth. And when they were asked what's the reason for the horse skull being there, they said it's to make the dancing sound better. That was my impression of Irish dancing there. I'm half Irish, so that's okay. And but basically, I don't believe the acoustic theory at all. I'm a musician when I'm not doing stuff like this. I am a guitarist. I have Herbert in my house, okay? When I play guitar next to Herbert, it does not sound any better. There's no resonance. It's absolutely mute. So I think that with the horse skulls, again, like with cats, I think we've got this idea that you've got an animal that we've got a benevolent relationship with. Also, horses sleep with their eyes open, so they're vigilant through the night when you're not vigilant. And they're also incredibly sensitive and jittery, and they're large animals. They make a noise when they're upset by something, you know, and they look formidable in skull form. Okay, so I think there's this idea of them serving again as guardians. Okay, they're nighttime guardians. But they have also been used as foundation sacrifices, and there is also an element of that. So again, in Merrifield's book, late 19th century, he describes the foundation ceremony of a chapel being created in Norfolk. And they sent the builder's boy out to the knacker's yard to get a horse skull, put it on a stake, poured some beer over it, said a few words before they started building it. Okay, and so clearly it was used in some foundation rituals as well. Now, in Scotland, Nigel Pennick, who some of you may know, he reported that apparently some horse skulls were discovered in the pulpit of an Edinburgh meeting house. Okay? And also, a USA tourist got in touch with me to say that a tour guide who gave him a tour of Edinburgh said a horse skull had been found in the old North Bridge. I don't know if anybody knows about that one. But if you hear about anything like this, do let me know. Right, we'll skip forwards, I think. So sometimes we find these collections of objects. So in Pershore, I lived in Pershore for many years. Behind a cast iron fire, again this cast iron fire thing at the bottom of chimneys, designed to protect you from witchcraft, partly is the reason. Found behind that a number of shoes representing occupants of the house, members of the family, also some little files which have been filled with urine and other substances. So we find these collections mixed with a little cross as well. So we've got, again, this idea that you can take sort of supernatural protection from any source, you know, and quite often people would use like known, normal religious stuff and mix it with folk belief and folk witchcraft, essentially. And there was no problem in people's minds. It wasn't like you must be religious or not. You would fuse all of this magic together. Okay, so people also used to put marks on their property as well. They would scratch them onto any of the surfaces. It could be on furniture, it could be on plaster, wood or stone. And I'll start with daisy wheels. Have any of you seen one of these marks before? The daisy wheel? Yeah. Okay, yeah, good. Well, of course, you've got the fantastic badge that I envy. Okay, but yeah, you can make these with a compass. So you draw a circle, put the point of the compass on the edge of the circle, draw another circle. Where those circles intersect, draw another circle, and so on, around and around and around the original circle, and you end up with 6 beautiful patterns. Okay. Now, the notion circles on their own do crop up on buildings as well, and essentially what we've got there is the earliest form of solar symbol. Okay. A circle is the simplest way of depicting the sun, and when you overlap them, you magnify them. Okay. And this symbol, in particular, the daisy wheel, is known in folk belief around the world as the solar symbol. If you go to Romania, they still carve this symbol onto their gateposts, okay? And they know it as a solar symbol. And it's actually a part of their cultural tradition, and they actually have government funding to make sure people don't forget that this is a symbol in Romania, which I think is fantastic. And then in the USA, for example, 17th century gravestones, you will often find this on gravestones there. You also find them in 16th century gravestones in Scotland as well. And in fact, even earlier, medieval gravestones in Scotland. On the House of Hebrides in particular, there are quite a lot of these daisy wheels there. But the earliest examples come from ancient Egypt. Okay, so you can find this in 1600 BC in Egypt. You can also find it in ancient Greece on bronze shields. Okay, you can also find it in ancient Rome on belt buckles, and you can find it throughout what we would used to call the Dark Ages, and throughout Europe as well. And it is an ancient solar symbol. The idea is that it's bringing the light of the sun to a place, which means that darkness will not lurk there. Okay, it's helping improve the security of the place. We find it quite often in England, for example, on church coffers, which always need protecting. So church coffers often have a lot of symbols on them, okay, and daisy wheels in particular. I call them databooks anyway. So this is on an 18th century corner cupboard, which is in my house, which my partner wishes wasn't, because it's kind of quite an ugly thing apart from the little daisy wheel in the corner. This was a fantastic door, which I wish I owned. We've only ever seen one like this. This is in Somerset. This was for a terrible programme by Nick Knowles that I was asked to be a consultant on for this door. Okay, so we've got these incredible. I think this door's brilliant, but the programme was terrible. They paid me to research this door, and they didn't even include it in the programme in the end. But yeah, it's just fantastic. And we also get things that we call Marian marks. Okay, so the Virgin Mary, in terms when we look at the Christian pantheon, for a pantheon it is, especially when we Google the saints as well. Within the Christian pantheon, the Virgin Mary was the loving and nurturing one. And even after the Reformation, people did not want to let her go. Okay, so belief in Virgin Mary continued unabated, despite the fact that many of the temples were destroyed. Now, what we have with Marian marks is usually collections of M's and V's, sort of overlapping and crossing. And anyone who knows anything about Catholicism, do we have any brave Catholics willing to put their hand up? Okay. So you're familiar with the monogram of the Virgin Mary, okay, which is a combination of W's, like a W and M overlapping. And what we do is we find this on medieval and later structures as well. And what we've got here, you can see we've got the M for Maria. Okay. Now, often it'll be the other way around as well, which could be VV, Virgo Virginum, Virgin of Virgins. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about this one is it's in Prince Arthur's Chantry in Worcester Cathedral. And Prince Arthur, had it not been for Henry VIII coming along, his younger brother, he would have been King Arthur. He died a little bit too soon. He was buried in Worcester. And you know, being in a chantry chapel, that tells you straight away that the monks and nuns of the area were praying for his soul. Okay? So they'd been paid to pray for his soul in death. Yet, despite all of that protection, near the high altar of one of England's most famous cathedrals, they still felt the need to put these invocational marks, requesting the protection of the Virgin Mary that is for him. Now, the really interesting thing about these marks like that is that you can find exactly that mark on your hand. Okay, so there we go, right down to the tapering arms at the end. Okay, you've got the sign of the Virgin Mary on your palm. Okay, well I have anyway. Maybe you haven't. Can anyone see that? It is right there on my palm. Okay, and what we find is that quite often the M for Maria crops up exactly like this, exactly the same as the lines on your palm. So this is one of the other kinds of marks that crop up very often, is we often get these mesh marks as well. So this appears to be a random load of crisscross things, but it's very deliberately done. It's not done to make plaster of here, or anything like that, which you can sometimes be the reason for scratches on stonework, for example. We find these sometimes in gable ends in American properties from the 17th century as well. And it appears to be like a symbolic net, or kind of something to prevent bad spirits from entering at that end of the building. There's also a line of thought that where the surface has been destroyed by the mark, there is almost like a sort of psychic line there, like creating a kind of pattern that is preventing things from hanging in that way. The Marian marks, just briefly, there are examples of that in Scotland. At Kilburney Palace, for example, not exactly a Marian mark, but there's a medieval fireplace there, and there's a bit of red sandstone, which must have come from somewhere else, which has the word Maria on it. And so you can see that there, they're using the Virgin Mary to protect the fireplace as well. We also have burn marks. Okay, so this one's from Anstruther in Fife. This particular house is very interesting. They found a nice rag doll there and crumpled bits of paper from the Bible as well in the same spot. But these burn marks, these are not accidental burnings. This isn't where a candle's fallen over. If that had happened, it would just sort of snuffle out and leave a bit of a sooty patch, which you could probably wipe off. Okay. These burn marks are deliberately done. John Dean and Nick Hill did some experimental archaeology published in the Vernacular Architecture Journal a few years back, which shows that you have to deliberately burn a piece of wood, scrape away the carbon layer, go back and burn it deeper, and keep going like that. And it can take up to 25 minutes to create a really deep one like this one. This particular chimney lintel also has this combination of a sort of monogram of A, M, and B, which seems to be Ave Maria Benedictus, like the blessing of the Virgin Mary on this chimney lintel as well. So we've got these kind of burn marks, which I think are essentially the creation of kind of spirit-form candles. Okay, so where the wood's been burnt away, we've kind of killed the wood, just like we killed the cat, just like we killed the pins, just like the horse has been killed and we're using its ghost form. but there's this bit of wood that isn't there anymore, that now on the other side is the shape of a candle flame. Do you see what I mean? So we've got, just like with the daisy wheels bringing the light of the sun that you can't see, but it's shining on the other side, we've got the light of the candle here, again, helping prevent darkness from lurking in that area. Right, so that essentially is my whistle-stop tour of all the artefacts, but I would like to just draw your attention to this. There are some leaflets upstairs, but in April next year, on April the 18th, in Chester, we've got a conference, or rather I am running a conference called Hidden Charms 3, and that's a list of the speakers there. It will be a really lovely day, much like this one. Okay. So anyway, that's my little whistle-stop tour of magical house protection. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.